Hello, it's good to see you guys. I thought after today's class where we kind of worked on um, a application that accesses a REST service, that this might be a nice time to kind of talk to you directly um, as opposed to having you kind of work through some prepared materials. So I'm going to try to do this quickly so this doesn't become a terribly long video, but please feel free to rewind or whatever you need to make sure that you understand what's going on. So if you look in the Canvas page, there's an announcement that I recently put up there that talks about using JavaScript to access REST services. And some of the JavaScript work you've been doing recently may seem a little dry, and so I wanted to show you how it can be used in creating an application. And in this particular case, we are going to try to develop an application that accesses a simple REST service. And a REST service is kind of like a URL for a normal web page, except instead of returning HTML, it's going to return JSON data. And we mentioned in the last section of the JavaScript book that JSON is a format that can be transmitted across the internet very easily. And so we wanted to kind of show you how to do that. So to start with, let's go ahead and go into GitHub. And you ought to create a new repository. I'm going to call it something like JavaScript Ajax. That's not a bad name. And I will go ahead and add a README to it so I can actually find it more easily. And so now hopefully I can grab that link to that and go into my Atom editor and pull up that link. And so this kind of gives me a place to start. And I'm going to create a new file here, index.html. And inside of that, I'm going to put this some of this information that I've just grabbed. So we're going to start out with kind of a bare bones HTML file. And it's going to just give us the ability to input. We're going to have a form here with an input box that lets me start typing the name of a city. So I could type a capital P, and it will hopefully then fill in this suggestion span with all the cities in Utah that start with a P. And eventually I'll find the one I want. I'll click the submit button here. It should go ahead and fill in the city that I'm getting data from. And then it's going to go to another REST service, find out what the current weather is in that city, and fill it in. So that's kind of a complex application. We're not going to do all of that today, but we're hopefully just going to do this part where you start typing characters into this input box, and then it fills in the hint for you. Okay? So if I go ahead and save that out, then I could go ahead and find it. And for now, I'm just going to go ahead and look in my GitHub directory here and JavaScript Ajax and look at this index.html, and hopefully we will start to see that So now you can see that we have a input area here where we can start typing things like Provo. We've got a suggestion area which starts out empty, and we're going to kind of move from there. Okay, so now we're going to look at the next step here, where we're going to let's start adding some behavior, some JavaScript. So initially, we're going to start by getting the element idea for that city field. So let's just look up here. Here's the city field. That's this input form. Okay. On the key up, I want you to call this function. And we're going to pass the function as a parameter. Yeah, so we've been learning about how we do that in JavaScript. And once we're inside that function, we're going to prevent the default behavior because we want to do our own thing, and then we're just going to pop up a alert box. Okay. The way this executes, it's going to execute this line, and all it's really going to do is change what happens on the key up event to call this function. Then it's going to drop right out the bottom and leave. Later on, when I actually type a character, then it's going to call this function that I've already set up to be associated with that event. Okay, so we got to put this down someplace near the bottom in our body here, so that when we start executing it, that it will already have this city field in it. Otherwise, it will give us an error. And let's go ahead and see what happens. So we go ahead and save that out. We're going to go ahead and grab this. Sorry, down here someplace. We're going to go ahead and do a refresh here. Now when we hit the P, notice that we popped up. It told us that this handler for key up was called, which is exactly what we told it to do. And again, I'm taking kind of baby steps here, so forgive me if we're going kind of slow. But that's all we're doing for now. We've called that function, and we've shown that it's called when we type a single character. Okay, so the next piece of this is we want to prove that we can modify this text hint span. Okay, so here's the text hint span, and we'd like to just show we can put something in there once we type a key. Okay, so let's go ahead and instead of popping up the alert, let's go ahead and grab the text hint thing, change his inner HTML to key up. So we'll go ahead and throw that in here instead of the alert and save that away. And let's go ahead and do a refresh here. Now when we type, and here's the empty suggestion span. So when I hit a Q, now it changes it to Q up. So that shows us both that we've got the key up event here, and we can modify other parts of our web page. And this is really how modern web applications work. We're going to initially paint the screen, then we're going to make calls to REST services and change the HTML inside of our DOM to be some dynamic data. Okay? So now we're going to take the next step. We would like to show that we can get a value from this city field as opposed to just grabbing the key up thing. So we're going to grab the city field's value and put that into the inner HTML instead of just putting that key up word in there. Okay, so now I'm going to go in here and we'll set the inner HTML of the text hint. Here it is. It's just this little span to whatever was in the city field form. And let's see how that works. So we go in here. Now notice it starts as empty. When I start doing Q, W, it puts whatever was inside that box and we put it into that span. Okay. This is just so much fun. hopefully you're getting excited too with the possibilities, and we can basically modify anything that's inside of our web page with JavaScript. Okay, the next piece we're going to do is we'd like to get some real data to put into that suggested span. And to do this, we're going to start, there's actually this REST interface, which we are going to call, here it is, it's bioresearch.byu.edu, and we put a Q equal and then whatever the prefix is, and it returns cities that have that prefix. So if I were to put this up here in the URL, then I'm going to notice that it returns all of the cities that start with a P in Utah. And notice it's going to return it as an array of JavaScript objects. These are actually JSON objects, notice, because it's got the quotes around the key. Normally, if it was a JavaScript object, it would just say city colon and the name of the city. So in order to talk to this REST service, and notice if I put other things in here, like an S, it's going to return all the cities that start with an S. So we're now seeing this is different than other URLs we've seen because it's going to generate dynamic data based on what we put in the URL. Okay, so let's go ahead and start doing that. And to start with, what we want to do is to create a file called staticcity.txt. And let's put some data that looks like what's going to be returned from a REST service. So I'm now going to go into here and create a new file called staticcity.txt. And I'm going to put into it this data. Okay. And now I want to modify my HTML to say, let's go to this URL. Right now, it's just going to go to a file. I'm going to call fetch on that URL. What fetch is going to do is issue an HTTP request to this URL. I'm going to say, when the response comes back, I want you to call this function. This function is going to basically convert the response from JSON into a JavaScript object. And when that completes, it's going to call this function. This function will take the JavaScript object, print it out. It's then going to print out the first element in the array, and then it's going to print out the city associated with the first element in that array. Okay? So let's go ahead and throw this in here. Here we are in our index.html. Here we are inside of the function that is going to be called on the key up for that particular key. We're now going to let's replace this other stuff that just proved we knew how to change the inner HTML with this code, which is going to beautify, that's what I wanted to do, which is going to, I don't know why that's not working. It's going to go ahead and call this function, convert it into JavaScript, and print some stuff on the console. Now save this junk out, and at this point, we could go ahead and, so at this point I can go ahead and start a web server up on my local machine here from that directory that I have associated with Adam. He's going to go ahead and run on port 8000. So I can go to port 8000, go ahead and do a reload, and with some luck, I can turn on inspect, look at my console. When I type in a character here, then notice it's going to, let's take a look at what the code is it's going to run here. Okay, so first it's going to console log the whole JSON object. So here's the whole JSON object. It's got the city Provo and the city Lehi, city colon. So notice it's a JavaScript object now. It doesn't have the quotes around city. And it has length of 2 for this array. I will then print the object, which has city colon Provo in it. And then I print out that I got Provo out of there. So here's the console logs for the whole array. Here's one of the elements in the array. And here is my particular element I'm interested in. And I like to do this. Initially, I'll probably throw that in and run it and see exactly what does the JavaScript object look like that he's returning. I then go ahead and do console logs till I find exactly the information that I want, and then I can go ahead and modify that. Okay? So now I'm going to, now that I know I can get it out of a file, let's go ahead and read all of the stuff that came back in the JavaScript object, and let's build some HTML that we're going to throw into that text hint. Okay, so notice I start with the variable. It's just going to have a UL on it. Here's the close UL tag. I'm now going to build some LI tags with all of the cities that I find inside of my JavaScript thing that was returned from my REST service. So if I take a look at this, then I'm going to, here's the stuff that occurs when the response comes back. And I never remember what the beautify is. Anyway, looks a little better. So here I'm going to go ahead and build this everything array and then put it into the text hint. So here's this text hint. It's the thing after suggestion. And we want to see if the thing that we returned out of the static city we can actually put in there. So let's go back here into my, run it again, do a refresh. Now when I hit a P, voila! Inside of this suggestion span, he put in Provo and Lehi, which were the things that I actually had inside of my static city.txt. So now I feel like I've got something that's very reproducible and predictable here that looks like what my REST service will provide. So I'm now going to go ahead and talk directly to my REST service. So if I look at that, we're now going to grab the real URL and right now we're just going to assume that we just want to get stuff that starts with P. So we'll go ahead and throw that into my URL. Instead of Adam here. Okay, here's the URL. Used to just go to that file. Now we're going to have it access a real website. And let's see what happens. So that's the URL I just put in there, except with Q equal to P. And now it should return something like this with all the cities that start with a P. Okay, let's do a refresh. Now I'm going to type any character here. Ah, voila! It did return all the cities that started with P. It's not really paying attention to what I'm typing in here. So let's fix that next. Now instead of having it just put a Q equal P, let's have it put a Q equals, and then let's grab the stuff out of the form and this input entry, which we already showed we know how to do earlier. So let's go ahead and grab that and put that all into my URL. And if in fact we wanted to, we could go ahead and print that out to the console. So let's go ahead and here we are. Here's my URL. So I'm going to not only put Q equals and then grab this city field's value, Again, city field is this input box, appended onto the back end there. And so if I wanted to, I could do a console.log of the URL just to make sure I know what it looks like. Save that out. Now when I come back to my page here, all kinds of confused probably here, but let's see what happens. Okay, so here's the URL. It has all of this stuff with the Q equals P. And it displays it. So if I put on a S here, you'll give me all the ones that start with S, A, all the ones start with an S-A, L for Salt Lake City and Salina and Salem. And so basically, I think this is really exciting because what we have here is the ability to read something out of any area on our web page, change it, anything on our web page, and it just gives you all kinds of possibilities for things you can do. So hopefully that's been a lot of fun for you. Again, the code here, if we review it again, we're first going to grab this city field, put in a listener for key up. Inside the listener is this whole function here. It's going to grab this URL, use fetch to access that URL. Once the response comes back, then he's going to build this everything HTML variable that displays the stuff that's in here. And if you'll notice, if I was to take a look at the elements inside of here, here's my form, here's my suggestions equal. Look at the span. The span actually has that URL, that UL stuff that I wrote. And if I was to like type in something else, like forum, notice that my span dynamically takes on those new values. So this is just like opening up superpowers for you guys. And I hope this has been a lot of fun and that you guys get excited about using JavaScript to actually do stuff that is really fun. So with that, we will go on to the next thing.